Okay, so I think it's a good time for us to kickstart the process. Thank you so much, colleagues, for joining us for the conversation today about the leader's talk. Um, my name is Omolara Balogun, as you can see on the screen, and I'll be the moderator of today's session. I work with an organization called the West Africa Civil Society Institute, WACSI. We're based in Accra, Ghana. And basically, we strengthen the capacity of civil society across West Africa. And engaged with diverse civil society organizations and various government specialized agencies across the globe. So about this platform is an initiative of Civic Advisory Hub, which is being co-led by a co-led platform for diplomacy-driven dialogues on pressing challenges, particularly around anti-money laundering, countering financing of terrorism. We also use this platform to engage on diverse issues around democratic governance, building civic space, its resilience, and promoting social justice and accountability. Today, we would be talking about terrorism financing risk assessment for African nonprofit organizations. We're going to be, exploring some of the lessons that we have learned, the challenges that we've encountered, and some of the stories that have been successful that to further strengthen our learnings. I would also be interjecting with some of the challenges that we have equally, experience in West Africa, another part of Africa. So today we have interesting colleagues in-house that will be giving us their expert insight on what exactly the risk assessment, what it means for nonprofit organizations on the continent. What is that when we're talking about terrorism financing risk assessment? What does it mean? How is it done? Where do we see it as civil society organization? What should we take note of? Do we even have a role to play in this process, or we leave it to the experts, colleagues working within the financial action, the financial intelligence centers or intelligence units, as we have it in some of the countries here in West Africa. In addition to that, we would also be exploring strategies to mitigate some of the unintended consequences of this process. What does it mean? So we have experts in the room that will be talking about that. You will agree with me that the role of civil society is quite vital in strengthening our democracy, and of course, in also creating the space for citizens to actively participate in their own processes of governance in their respective countries. And increasingly, we are seeing a lot of our government that are tightening the regulatory environment in which civil society operates. But how can civil society operate in an environment that is progressive, in an environment that enables them to advance the goal for which they have been set up? Some of the feedback that we have seen, or some of the experiences that we have heard across the continent, and I dare say even the globe, is the fact that increasingly nonprofit organizations constantly face different degrees of abuses, not only by terrorist organizations, but other entities that are pretty much involved in organized all forms of organized crimes. And this has been a major concern, not only to FATF, but increasingly to various national government. And government have had to tighten their security across our countries under the guise of national securities, which often, stifle the work that civil society does across various jurisdictions. And right now, the FATF Recommendation 8 requires different national government to conduct risk assessment of nonprofit organizations. But what does this mean? We have various data that shows that not all nonprofits are at risk. And if government decides to use a single yardstick, to carry out this assessment, it means we will be subjecting all the nonprofit organizations to similar risks. But this is something that we believe should be looked at, and it should be, targeted to those that are at risk. So the conversation today, in terms of the exact objectives, we would be unpacking what the risk assessment process, what is it about, what kind of methodologies would the technicians be using, how will it be applied, and what are the best practices that we should take into considerations across our jurisdictions. And of course, what are the tools and approaches that can make the process, smart? What are those specific tools? What are those measurable, achievable, and relevant tools that both the technicians and NPOs should take into considerations during this processes? And most importantly, how can we foster, dialogue? How can we create and sustain a platform to continue across, sectoral collaborations between the lawmakers, between government, the specialized agencies, the GIABA, the various national financial intelligence centers, civil society, and other stakeholders. So this is just by way of context setting. We have two amazing experts in the room from both worlds, from the government side and from the NPO side, that will be sharing insight into what this risk assessment, what it entails, and what civil society organization, nonprofit general should expect, and the role they can play. In no particular order, the first speaker I have on my list is Mr. Difat Tembo. Difat is the director of the Compliance and Prevention Department of the Financial Intelligence Center, FIC, in the Republic of Zambia. He is a member of the AML-CTPF National Risk Task Force of Senior Officer in the Zambia, where he served in the Secretariat. He also sits on the Anti-Money Laundering Authority, AMLA, which is the highest AML-CTFP policymaking body in the country. He is the national liaison person for the MLTF National Risk Assessment. He's an experienced designer and deliverer of AML CFTFP training and risk-based supervision to the financial sector, designated non-financial businesses and professions, and virtual asset service providers. So it's so obvious that DFAT has been in this space all his life. He also lectures on AML CFTP models. DFAT, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation today. Thank you so much. The second speaker we have in the conversation today is Dr. Stephen Okello. Dr. Stephen is the secretary of the NGO Bureau in Uganda, under the Ministry of Internal Affairs, which serves as the national regulators for NGO. He previously served as the Bureau's executive director. Dr. Okello played a pivotal role in Uganda's first terrorism financial risk assessment conducted between 2016 and 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you our speakers for today. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate the time you will be spending today with us to educate us and also to share your expert insights, experiences on what this risk assessment, what it truly means, and how we should brazen up as non-profit organization. So without no further ado, like I said, we'll be digging deeper into what the process entails and what it is not actually, what kind of tools can help the process, to be as effective, efficient, and also to ease the tension on nonprofit organizations, and what should be avoided during the processes. Before I invite my speaker to begin to share their insight, I would like to invite my sister and colleague, Julie Butinde, the Research and Communications Officer at Civic Advisory Hub, to give an opening remarks on behalf of the Executive Director, Mr. Yunawanjana. Julie, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Omolara. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. Thank you so much, Omolara, for the introduction. My name is Julie Butinde. I work for the Civic Advisory Hub as a Research and Communications Advisor. My job today is very simple, just to welcome you and to extend our gratitude to our speakers, Dr. Stephen Okello and Mr. Difat Tembo from the FIC Zambia. Thank you for making the time to be with us this morning and to offer your expertise on this topic. Allow me to also speak briefly about our organization. For those who haven't interacted with us, we are a non-governmental organization that is committed to research, advocacy, and capacity building. Our goal is to enhance the competencies of the civil society actors and all relevant stakeholders to mitigate and manage the unintended consequences of the anti-money laundering and countering of terrorism financing framework. What we are on right now is one of our initiatives, that is the Leaders Talk Africa. It is a platform for dialogue, collaboration. Our goal is to bring the highest, the creme de la creme of people in their areas of expertise for dialogue talks on very topical subjects. Of course, our niche is AML, CFT, and IFF, but we always bring a wide range of people, a variety from people from different walks of life and from different expertise, to be able to have, to dialogue, to dialogue in a very diplomatic way about topical issues. Allow me to also speak briefly. Some of you might be aware of our regional conference on placing civic space at the heart of combating money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism, which will be held next month. We are at the tail end of preparations for the event. I would like to welcome all of you to join us in Botswana, in Gaborone, between the 15th and the 17th of October. I believe most of us have registered. Those who haven't, I don't know if the slots are still there, but we invite you to join us. It is a very critical conversation and dialogue to be had, and I invite you to follow us. The proceedings will all be live, so you can always join us online and be part of the discussion. Thank you once again, and I wish us all very successful deliberations. Thank you, Omolara. Back to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Julie, for that brief and detailed remarks at the same time. And thanks for touching on the conference that we all look forward to. So, leaders, we want to talk about this risk assessment. And I'm going to start with our dear Dr. Stephen, the Secretary, National Bureau for NGOs in Uganda. What exactly are we talking about? What is this, TF risk assessment for NPOs, the processes, what does it entails? Who does it cover? What frameworks are we looking at? How is it done? What methodologies would we be using for these processes, and what steps is your bureau actually taking to ensure meaningful participation of NPOs in the process? Because I do know most times when it comes to security and national issues, government tries to hold those issues close to heart, and shoved off the other parties, like non-for-profit, especially. So from where you sit as an expert who has been in the space, the field, who does this on a daily basis, what exactly are we talking about? And if you can also give us your firsthand experience of what this process entails and some of the lessons that you've gathered, over the years. I understand from your profile, you've done this for a couple of years, and it will be good for us as NPOs to understand and better prepared. Dr. Stephen, you have 10 minutes. Tell us what exactly this is.
Yes, thank you so much, moderator. Unfortunately, the 10 minutes to say all those may not be um, enough, but let me try and work as fast as I can. So thank you so much, moderator, but also greetings to my fellow panelist, Mr. Difa Tembo from Zambia. Greetings to all the participants who have spared time to join this engagement. Let me start by thanking Civic Advisory Hub for this opportunity because it's giving us a platform to share and also engage. So really thank you for organizing this and also so many other engagements that you have organized. Just to say something briefly about NPO Bureau before I can respond to this is that the National Bureau for NGOs, abbreviated as NGO Bureau, under Minister of Internal Affairs, is the government regulator that is mandated to register, monitor, and inspect all the NGOs in this country. But also we support the work of the NPOs. So this means that we are not just a regulator, but also we are an enabler. We are there to support the sector to ensure that it's growing and not heading the opposite direction. So, but also the role that we are playing is ensuring that the NPO sector is empowered to deliver the services to the communities and their beneficiaries, but also protecting them from the misuse and abuse. And that's why such an engagement is very key to us. We are all aware that the sector is making very huge contributions to the development of the different countries that they're in, but also their services are very essential. And that is why with this NPO TF risk assessment, we want to ensure that the space within which the sector operates remains open, safe, and trusted, because if we do not do that, then they are going to lose the trust. So from the side of the NGO Bureau and also the experience with these previous engagements, the first NPO TF risk assessment for Uganda was conducted in 2021, where a working group for this exercise was constituted, and we engaged around 220 NPOs who participated in the different interviews and also responded to the survey questions that came up. And of course, this exercise just provided an opportunity for the government to get an in-depth understanding of the NPO sector in Uganda and also to identify the risks and the vulnerabilities that are involved so that we are aware of what could be exploited by the criminals. Now, this exercise is important because it takes away the unnecessary suspicions that at times are there and even assumptions. So through this exercise, you are speaking more specific than assuming things. So this assessment reviews the adequacy of the laws and the regulations, but also the effectiveness of the institutions that give the oversight to the sector. So in the first findings overall for Uganda through this exercise, we found that the overall level was low when it comes to the TF risk rating. And of course, when we talk about NPOs, we are meaning NGOs, CBOs, trusts, and also the faith-based organizations. And that's in accordance to the FATF definition. But of course, within the law, we also established that there were two categories in Uganda that were concerned, mainly those organizations operating close to borders with heightened insecurity. Uganda's got borders that are having such challenges, but also we have faith-based organizations in Uganda that are mainly focused on Islamic teachings. And all of you know them as the madrasa schools that around. And Uganda found that they also had this. So based on those findings that we established, Uganda was able to apply enhanced monitoring and focused measures to mitigate the TF vulnerabilities that the NPOs operating in those areas of either insecurity exposed to, but also in addition, the stakeholders involved, at least were able to come on board to also support the implementation of the recommendations that came up in that report that was good for us. So to now go to more specific to the questions that you have asked, moderator, one, of course, is that what is the process like? What does it entail? Now, this being our, at least we have had experience before, but also I want to inform everyone that Uganda launched the second round for their NPO risk assessment on the 4th of September, and that's around 2 weeks ago, because that exercise, I think the overall objective is to help us update the previous one. We want to find out, has the status quo remained? Is it still the same? Is the risk level still low? Or things have changed? So we feel that with that, this is going to help us, but also it's going to help us further understand this whole risk that is being posed. And so that's what we shall be looking at. But also the specific objectives for this exercise. One is to identify and assess the TF threats, the vulnerabilities, and the consequences that of these NPOs that meet the definition of the Financial Action Task Force. But also the other specific objective is to profile the NPOs in Uganda, which are likely to pose higher TF risks. The third one is to propose and really come up with a recommendation on how to mitigate this risk assessment. So based on this, all the competent authorities can then come on board to ensure that they are mitigating all the risks. So in terms of the first exercise that we conducted, that of course gave us the experience that we may have now, we used the Financial Action Task Force guidance on the risk assessment methodology. And of course, in addition to that, we also drew specific international advice for the assessing of the risk when it comes to the NPO sector. And of course, we looked at all the different categories involved. And in terms of the process, let me just run through them, just outlining them. The first step, of course, to embark on this exercise, you need to start by setting up the working group, which of course is the technical team that is going to conduct this exercise. It's mainly comprised of representatives from the government, the private sector, and the NPO sector. Now, in Uganda, for this one that we're embarking on, the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Internal Affairs wrote to different stakeholders to nominate individuals to be part of this working group. That was done. The individuals were all nominated and they actually set to actually begin the work. The next step, of course, is to launch the exercise as a point to actually kickstart the exercise. Like now for Uganda, this recent launch was something to really kickstart all this. Now, after the launch, what is supposed to happen is that the working group is supposed to sit down and develop and ensure that the data collection tools are all approved and the right ones they're going to use, because you need to look at all the structured survey questionnaires and also the kind of interviews you're going to engage the stakeholders with. And after having all the data collection tools in place, then next is gathering the data from the different stakeholders who include the regulators around the country, the NPOs themselves, law enforcement agencies around the country, but also open source, because they still useful information out there that can be helpful. But of course, this also is combined with the qualitative and the quantitative information that you'll either be able to collect from either professionals out there to give more insights, but also there's a lot of financial intelligence out there that you can make use of to actually help this exercise. But we also further engage security agencies, because we are all aware at times they have a lot of classified information. So we also benefit from that. We also engage the media and also further to look at the other open source publications that could be there, so that all this helps us to gather the data. Now, after the part of gathering the data is concluded, We then proceed to conducting the analysis, which is now the most sensitive part because you need to have the skills to carefully analyze mainly the vulnerabilities and the threats that are specific to the NPO activities in the country. And of course, this is an area where you should be very careful. If you do not analyze the data carefully and you bring out wrong findings and recommendations, then you're going to mislead all stakeholders. You're
Yeah.
going to either make the sector look bad, and yet actually they're actually innocent from all this. So we should be very careful when the analysis. Then once the analysis is done, we then move to drafting the risk assessment report. And upon drafting it, it is also supposed to be subjected to stakeholder review. The stakeholders are supposed to look at it and be sure that what you're capturing is actually correct, because this report has to bring out the key findings of the assessment, but also the recommendations. Now, once that report is actually done, a very critical and most important point is now the dissemination of this final report. And there are
Mhm.
so many steps that are supposed to be involved in doing this. The first one, of course, is the formal launch. You need to formally launch that report so that the country can have full ownership and all stakeholders can appreciate that, yes, this is the report. After that launch is done, you're supposed to upload that report on the website on the key stakeholders. Like in Uganda, you have the Financial Intelligence Authority, you have the Minister of Internal Affairs, you have the NPO Bureau, and also other key stakeholders. In addition
Mm.
to that, you're also supposed to hold awareness raising engagements, like webinars like this one, so that people know what were your findings, what are the recommendations, what are the roles they are supposed to play in doing their part. But also, in addition to things like webinars, you need dialogues to
Mm.
further engage on this. After that, in addition, you also have to distribute printed copies because there are people who may not have the opportunity to be a part of those engagements online. So you have to look for them, give them printed copies. But also those who miss the printed copies, you have to find a way to share soft copies on social media platforms so that the people can know what is contained in this report. But in addition to that, you have to further engage stakeholders to receive feedback. And it's important that you always appoint a particular contact person. And if possible, also establish an online platform where people can actually give you feedback. But in addition to that, you're also supposed to have some sustained engagements with the NPO sector, who are, of course,
Mm.
the most affected here, through having more dialogues, more reflection meetings, so that they can understand what is coming up. But also, you need to do more awareness raising with the different stakeholders so that people appreciate the TF risks, the trends, and also the methods that are there. But the other one that is key is to conduct mass media engagements so that the media helps you to disseminate all this information. But also, in addition to that,
Thank you.
you need to train the stakeholders. So, moderator, I think I can stop there for now. Whatever I've
Yes.
not touched on, I'll come back, mainly methodologies and other areas. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Stephen. This is a whole lot. So I understand, and I understand what you meant when you said, how can I do this in 10 minutes? This is it's very important. And I love the way you ran all through how your country go through the process from the start, setting up a technical working group, etc., etc. But two things that stood out for me, and maybe before I go on, colleagues on the call, please, if you have any direct questions, comments, please let's make use of the chat box. Let's drop our questions and comment. I hope to have time to pick one or two people to, interject directly intervene directly during this conversation. But Dr. Stephen, yes, I do understand that analysis is very important. It's an important, aspect of the process so that we don't mislead. Um, we don't have a distorted, report that would then lead to recommendations that would then lead to, different or unexpected feedback and plans for the sector. So I think this is really, really important. And another point that stood out strongly for me, which I think I'm going to ask you a question on, was when you define the sets of organizations that you are looking at for NPO based on the FATF definition. But you said even trust. You said trust. And this is something that I would need to find out because I know trust are treated differently in my part of the world as non-direct, NPO. They have a different set of regulations and regulatory requirements that they work with. So I will come a little bit to that. I'll come back to that in a while. But maybe before I open the floor, let me come to Bifat Tembo, the Director of Compliance and Prevention, FIC Zambia. I mean, you are also in the same space. And you've been part of this processes. In fact, you've lived this processes for a couple of years. So we would like to hear what the process looks like in the Zambia. We do understand that context sometimes shapes and reshapes processes sometimes, looking at the national laws, the configuration of civil society in respective countries, and maybe the level of risk as well. It could reshape how processes, are conducted. So from the Zambia, we would like to know some of the critical success factors in completing TF risk assessment for NPOs in the Zambia. And what are those strategies and approaches that proved to be most effective, particularly in getting the buy-in of the sector? It's another thing if government has the power to do what they want to do. But what we have seen that have been most successful is when government collaborates with whichever sector, be it the business sector, the private sector, the non-profit sector. There's always a better result when we work together. So what kind of strategies and approaches has really helped the Zambia, in getting a kind of a buy-in of civil society, NPOs in the process? And I'm sure there are no processes without setbacks, challenges. Can we learn from the challenges that you have encountered in the Zambia? And what are some of the best practices? So it's a full question, but I believe you're going to touch on them, here and there. So tell us, what have been your experiences in the Zambia? What are the success stories? What are the challenges? How did you bring in how did you buy in civil society's interest? Please, you have 10 minutes now.
All right. So thank you very much, Omorara. And thank you very much, Civic Advice for having those trainings.
Sorry, Difat, I think there is another laptop close to you maybe in the same office or in the space. So there's a bit of echo. So if the other other gadget can be muted, that would be great so we can hear you clearly. Thank you.
I hope I can do that. If it doesn't work out, I have to maybe give me 1 minute. Let's see what I can do.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah, colleagues, please, I'm monitoring the chat box. Let's see if we have comment. And it's also a good opportunity for you to introduce yourself using the chat box. Let's know where you are joining from, your organization, your designations, so that we know the kind of people in the room, the audience that we have in the room today. Please use the chat box to introduce yourself and also to ask your questions, your comment or contributions to the conversation we're having on the TLT.
Omrara, can I proceed?
Yes, you can, but it still echoes. So I'm sure there is another gadget around you. There's another gadget around you.
Ask my colleague to go to the other side.
So can you mute the gadget so that you use just one? If you are connected, If you've connected with two different appliances, can you mute one so that you speak through one?
Currently, I'm using only one. That is a gadget that I'm using, but most of the
No.
meeting with friends that I had to go out.
So
Yeah.
it echoes. Any other gadgets in the office, can it be muted?
No, not
Muted.
really. There is no any other gadget, Morana. Maybe it's just a problem of connection. So, but otherwise, there's no any other gadget I'm using.
Okay, so could you disconnect and reconnect?
Okay, let me try to do
Yes.
that.
Yes, excellent, fantastic. So let's do that. Yes, I'm looking in the chat, so I can see colleagues introducing themselves. Thank you so much. Somebody says, can you please tell me more about AML, CFT supervision of NPOs? Okay, I'm sure our speakers would be able to speak to that. Dr. Stephen, whilst we wait for you, and I see you in the room. Thank you for joining us, finally.
Thank you, Omo. Please carry on.
Thank you so much. So we have a question in the room, and I mean, it's really interesting to see the diverse colleagues that we have here. Do we have Difat back? Excellent, Difat, you're back. Can you hear me, Difat?
How is it now?
It's fantastic now. 100 over 100. Please tell us.
Okay, I think maybe the gadget was trying to play some magic so that after Doc has spoken, it becomes very difficult to speak after Doc, who I've known for years. He's an interesting speaker. He's my brother and I follow him very closely. Thank you very much again, Doc, for laying that foundation. And there are a few things that, of course, I needed just to speak about, which are a bit technical, but I think they'll give context to what we are discussing today. We are all aware that NPOs play a very significant role in the provision of social services, especially to those that are in need. And because of the work that NPOs play, they have gained this trust from donors and those that would provide funds for them to carry their good works. So terrorist financiers and those that are involved in criminal activities would want to take advantage of the good works that NPOs play to abuse them. Now, it is very, very important for us to understand that NPOs are not terrorist organizations. I think it is very, very important to start with that point. And I think when we are starting the process of a risk assessment, again, it is very, very important to unpack the requirements under the FATF recommendation 8, as well as immediate outcome 10. I think for me, that is a very starting point. Before you even go to the industry to talk about risk assessment, understand these requirements under recommendation 8. That is very critical. IO 10, very critical. And there's something that I want to pick out of there. It's not all NPOs, okay, that operate in the non-for-profit realm are at risk of being abused for TF. I think that is a very profound statement, and therefore, FATF, what has done is to say, okay, only those NPOs that meet the FATF definition should be considered, and I'm using the word should be considered when you are undertaking risk assessment. So the starting point, once you unpack that, understand what it entails, then you can go to your policymakers. Very, very important. Get a buy-in from government officials, get a buy-in from the NPO umbrella bodies, and the NPOs themselves begin to explain the importance of undertaking risk assessment to identify those NPOs that may be at risk of being abused for TF. I think that is very, very profound. And why are we doing that? So that at the end of the day, the measures that we are promulgating as jurisdictions are focused, proportionate, and indeed risk-based, that are not going to disrupt the activities of legitimate NPO.
Hello? Oh, so we just lost, okay, DFAT is still there. DFAT, can you hear me? Hello, DFAT? DFAT, if you are there, I can see you have another gadget here, but we can't hear you anymore. Colleagues, can you hear me? Julie, can you hear me? Just to be sure.
Yes, we can hear you. I think
Yeah,
there's
we can
a
hear you.
connection issue
I
with
think
the
it's,
fan.
yeah.
All right, fantastic. Okay, so I think I'm going to go back to Dr. Stephen, who is still on the call, by the way. Thank you so much. I want to come back to you. So one of the questions that we have in the room, somebody said you should, I believe this is to either yourself or DFAT, and I wanted you to just respond to it very quickly before I go into the other sets of questions that I have. So can you please tell me more about AML CFT supervision of NPO? How is that supervision done? So this is different from risk assessment. As a regulator, what do you regulate? I believe this is what this person means. So I think that's one question that I would like you to address. And I think from my side, one other questions I would like you to address is, you talked about the technical working group or technical group that is usually put together to handle this risk assessment. Does that group include any civil society body, maybe a network, a national network of civil society, just so they are part of the process, or is strictly government, regulators, private sector? So these two questions, please, if you can attend to it very quickly whilst we wait for DFAT to join back the call. Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you, moderator. Actually, the questions are three. You have forgotten that you asked the first question on trusts. So I think I've noted three questions. So the first one, I think, let me start with the last one, the technical working group. This one is not only for government entities. I had indicated that it has government, the private sector, and the NPOs. In Uganda right now, in the current group that is for this particular exercise, we have three key entities, including even the Civic Advisory Hub is a member of this. We have the NGO Forum that is an umbrella body. Yeah, and then I think another one. So, and we hope with the time the number can actually increase. So we have not left out the NPO sector. And of course, during the engagement, they felt if we brought on board more, the better. So we hope in the next exercise. However, also you can co-opt. We have that room that if we feel along the way we need more people coming on board from the sector, that will also be done. Now, let me answer the question that was posted in relation to the supervision and the monitoring. Now, you're all aware that Uganda removed the NPOs from the list of 100 persons. And of course, after that, we had to adopt the risk-based approach that emphasizes that helps you focus and target only the high-risk NPOs within the FATF definition of vulnerability. and also those identified through the NPO risk assessment, like this one we are talking about. So what we are doing as a regulator in relation to the question asked, we apply what we call very targeted risk-based supervision and monitoring of NPOs, meaning that it's not just broad or else open-ended. No, it's extremely targeted. And of course, to help us achieve that, we have in place a risk-based supervision framework that actually guides that. But also in addition to that, we also have a strategy, a plan, and a manual. Those are very important documents and instruments that should guide those activities. Because if you don't, then you're going to end up crossing into arenas that are not the right one. But also, we have a risk-based supervisory plan in place that helps us achieve what actually he has asked about. But also, we have customized M&E and inspections tools in place. And the reason they're customized is, of course, to help us that the risk-based approach we are using is for both the on-site and off-site, so that we are not going outside that area. But also it helps us to identify and target only the high-risk NPOs, meaning that the others that don't fall in the category which the risk assessment identifies to us, then we leave them out. But also moving forward to further institutionalize those things I've just said, we're also reviewing the NGO Act in Uganda, and we hope to incorporate this whole risk-based approach into it so that the affected subsection of the NPO sector that's at risk is well captured and it comes out clearly, so that we are guided by the law when enforcing this and no one is abusing it or going out of it. Your third and last question was on the trust. Now, under the FATF definition, as I'd indicated earlier, we have NGOs, CBOs, faith-based organizations, and then the trusts, the charitable trusts. Now, in Uganda, we have the Trusts Incorporation Act, where those entities that do not want to incorporate their entities decide to appoint trustees and have them go out and do a similar thing which NGOs are doing, but for them, they don't go under a full entity. So what I was referring to for Uganda is what falls under the Trustees Incorporation Act, where individuals appoint their trustees who go under our Minister of Lands here and have them incorporated. And so the incorporation, the entities, mainly the individuals who are incorporated under this law, and they're the ones who are a part of this exercise. Yeah, I hope that
Thank
answers
you.
questions. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it does. Thank you so much. DFAT, I see you back in the room. Please, can you unmute yourself and then give us the insight from Zambia? You started. DFAT, please take the floor.
Yes, apologies. A bit of some connections issues here, and I hope I
We understand.
won't again rope, but let me see and matters before I get another problem. Apologies again, like I said, it's a bit
It's
frustrating,
fine.
especially for those that are following. Again, we'll see how we can do this. Government,
Yep.
you get a buy-in from the civil society, and after that, what you need to do is to now begin to look at assessment. As you are aware, the Financial Action Task Force has not prescribed any methodology that you may need to use when you are conducting a TF risk assessment for NPOs. But also what has happened is that different organizations such as the World Bank and others have come up with these tools. I think it is very important that as countries you sit down and discuss what tools are we going
to use.
The EU AML CFT Global Facility tool that was provided to us is called the Grain Associate. And this was with the assistance, of course, the EU, and one Mamuka was behind this, very, very helpful. And what we did is we identified, of course, NPOs that fall under the FATF definition. We had about 17,445. Out of that, only about 500 plus made the FATF definition. Now, what was interesting, out of these 4,500 plus or 4,400 plus, only, and this is very, very important information, found that only 4. This is surprising, but true. Only 4, when we did an assessment, only 4 of the NPOs in Zambia were found to be at high risk of being abused for TF. 22 failed under the medium, and over 4,000 plus failed under the low medium. So what does that mean? We immediately went to come up with a focus and proportionate measures for the high risk, as well as the medium risk, as well as the low risk. So that as we begin to monitor them or provide an oversight, we do not disrupt their activities. And we have on further to publish this document so that the financial sector, who sometimes, and I'm sorry to mention that, they tend to look at NPOs as posing or rather presenting high risk, and they tend to de-risk them, denying them that access to banking facilities. And so that is very, very important for us. So the other thing that we experience in terms of challenges, indeed, like any other country, we have found that the way we keep our information as jurisdiction is something that we really need to improve. We face that challenge when we administer the questionnaires to different stakeholders that may be late reply or late response, but also the aspect of not having complete information. Again, it's an advice that I'm giving to those that are going to begin their risk assessment, that please ensure that your information is prioritized, because you definitely face some challenges like we did. Financial issues, definitely the funding aspect, no one can say challenge. We started the process in 2023, one completed in 2024 because we needed resources to complete this exercise. Let me just conclude. I know I missed some of the minutes, but it's important for those that are now looking to start the process. There are a few questions that I have for you, and to guide those that are following us on the call. It is very, very important to ask these questions and answer these questions as you begin your process. Ask yourself, were the methodology, tool, and scope appropriate in your previous assessment? Start with that question. Were there issues with data collection? And that could be resolved for the next iteration. Very, very important to deal with that question as you begin your next risk assessment. Were all relevant stakeholders involved? Did you leave out other important stakeholders like maybe the intelligence services and others? Did the sector experience any difficulties developing TF risk understanding? Those questions are very critical for those countries that are intending to undertake TF risk assessment for this sector. Were there any difficulties with selection and implementation of the mitigative measures? What we have seen that people just tend to apply these measures to the whole sector, even those that were not even assessed, and that's not the intention of recommendation 8. As the TF risk landscape changed, are there new threats and vulnerabilities to include? Please answer these questions as you begin your next TF risk assessment for NPOs. Which vulnerable areas have seen the introduction of risk mitigative measures? What data was lacking, and what can we learn from the previous undertaking? And what else you need to do is to ensure that consult with other countries that have gone through these processes.
Oh my goodness. Oh, we lost DFAT again. And I didn't want to stop him because I know internet was being nice this time around. I wanted him to run through all his comments. But thus far, DFAT has really shared with us a very insightful experience they've had in the Zambia. And most of his comments kinds of, pretty much resonate with what
Sure that
Dr. Okelo said. DFAT, are you back? Okay, I mean, the internet is not nice to us today. Okay, let me just continue with a
just
brief
like
of
I
what he
said,
said.
I'm very disappointed. I should mention. I think let me leave it there. And if there are questions, I'm
Yes,
willing to take. All in all, make sure that you do the right thing right. I'm very disappointed, but I hope one or two things have been gotten from my
no,
end. Thank
don't.
you very much.
Thank you, DFAT. You don't have to be disappointed. This is technology. Technology, it happens all the time. It happens all the time. So it's not, please don't personalize it at all. We all take ownership of this. I think Africans, we can do better with our access to technology and the quality of it. But you've really, really shared some interesting insight from your experience in the Zambia. And I was just telling colleagues on the call that most of the points that you raised kind of align with Dr. Okelo. And it's really interesting to see how countries, regulators, government are trying their best to kind of align with the FATF recommendations and, a kind of having a uniform approach, but of course with some contextualized demand. I think one point that you stretched on, which aligns with Dr. Ekelo, is adopting a risk-based approach to the assessment, including the designing of the tool, the monitoring, the methodology, data collection. And I think that's really what we want as civil society, as not-for-profit. We believe a finger fits all is going to be a real, a disruption, cost a lot of disruption to the work that we do, because we know that not all of us are at the same level of vulnerability or threats. And I think one important point that you raised is also the fact that government and regulators like yourself are also focusing on producing, mitigative measures, for those that are risk, be it low, medium, or even high risk. And you also said something that is very interesting, which is, I mean, one of the questions I wanted to ask both of you is that, the sector in which we work as NPO is fast changing. We are seeing shrinking all sorts, shrinking actors, shrinking resources, and even at the level of government, there has been, a lot of restrictions to the space generally. And what does this mean even to terrorism financing and the kind of assessment that recommendation 8 creates room for? And this is very close to the questions I have in the room. So somebody asked the question, I'm going to paraphrase the question. When I saw it, I was really excited that most of the risk that TF, goes after for organizations that have access to international funding, traditional funding, as it were, external funding. But looking at the current shift within our funding space, with the shutdown of USAID, lots of money left the country, the continent, and of course the shrinking resources generally. Don't you think that an assessment of this magnitude could probably be disproportionate? Because, I mean, even most of these NGOs, increasingly, we are talking about localized funding, that is alternative resource mobilization, NGOs focusing looking within to mobilize their resources. And this is not to undermine the fact that a lot of money laundering also takes place within our different jurisdictions. Any countries that have high level of corruption will definitely, create that room for money laundering to move, within state to state, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's one question. Do you think that this level of assessment is still required, considering that most NPOs do not have access to, the same level of international funding they used to have prior to, even AML-CFT and FATF recommendation at all. I think that's one. The second question I want to ask is that how do we ensure? So in West Africa, one of the things that I can say that we have done so well is creating platform, a multi-sectoral platform where the regulators, the legislative arm of government and civil society sit together to assess, the risk of the sector, the vulnerabilities of the sectors, and also kind of identify organizations that are high, medium, and low risk. But the question is, and we've also spent a lot of, we've made a lot of investment in building capacity on what goes on into this. But the question I want to ask to yourself and Dr. Stephen, is that within the work that you have done thus far, what do you see or what are you seeing as new vulnerability coming up, for your respective countries? And what do you also think that we as non-for-profit should pay attention to? Like I said, our sector is shifting, a lot of things are changing. Do you think this would cause any significant changes to the nature of your work, the nature of TF risk assessment, and what are the emerging issues that you are also considering maybe to incorporate into the process as regulators? I'm going to start with Dr. Stephen, if you can answer that question. I'm also looking in the room to see if colleagues have new questions. I see a hand up, but Dr. Stephen, if you can answer that question first, then I will bring on board Annie Popo. I'm sorry, I hope I got your name directly, to intervene for about a minute. So Dr. Stephen, what are the emerging risk or vulnerability threats that you're seeing that you are also reconsidering or factoring into the process, as a regulator? Please, if you can explain that to us in 2 minutes, then I'll bring Annie up.
Yes, thank you. And first of all, to my fellow panelists. In fact, I'm really feeling bad that the internet is not helpful to him, especially in a very important engagement like this, because he was sharing very useful information and I was benefiting as someone about to embark on this exercise for the second round. So I just hope we can have a side engagement to further benefit. I was enjoying all those questions you want us to ask ourselves as we go there. But of course, even before I go into the question of the actual risk that we are seeing, I think for me overall, I want to indicate that, of course, related to a question there, that this exercise, of course, I know there's that mutual mistrust between the government and the sector. So I just want to indicate that this exercise is not aimed at controlling or even causing any restrictions on the sector, because I'm seeing that tone already coming out and the fear. But of course, the concern that is coming out about the shrinking funding, I think if you asked me of the risks and the vulnerabilities coming now, moderator would clearly tell you my biggest concern right now is exactly what we're already discussing here. That if globally, even regionally, even nationally within the countries, we are seeing the funding is shrinking for the sector. The worry should be that the sector is going to become a bit desperate because they need that funding. It means they will be ready to receive any money. And for me as a regulator, that is my fear. That is my worry, that if we continue this direction, it means the money launderers, the finances of these terrorist activities are going to exploit that. The sector is going to become more vulnerable because people need that money. It is drying up every year that passes. The situation is getting worse and worse. Global trends are even worsening it. The wars you see around are worsening the situation. And so for me, what we should be something of key attention is that the funding is shrinking. people are going to
Mhm.
become desperate, and that is what we need to all pay attention to. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stephen. Thank you. I see a couple of questions, but before I come to them, let me give Annie 1 minute to ask questions or make contributions to this conversation. Annie, if you can unmute yourself, you have the floor now. Annie. Annie, are you there? Can you unmute yourself, please?
See, Annie posted in the chat that will come in a little bit later. The consent has already been addressed.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I have another question in the room. It says, in my understanding, NPOs are susceptible to abuse by terrorists. But in our discussion and presentation, why do we still talk about money laundering in the space of NPOs? So why are we talking about money laundering and not terrorism? I'm tempted to answer that, but I'm going to leave it to our speakers. So, DFAT, if you're in the room, there's been a lot of conversation. Okay, I see you're still there. A lot of conversation around money laundering, money laundering, money laundering, money laundering. What about terrorism? So I think it would be good if you can help us establish that linkage between money laundering and terrorism financing. Just so I think the name of the person that asked the question is of the fence, good your mind, so that we all can be educated. So DFAT, you have 2 minutes to do that.
Right. Just very quickly, if you look at the FATF standards, recommendation 1 is so particular where money laundering financing in the nation has to be assessed under. So there is a specific recommendation that requires us countries to undertake the national risk assessment for money laundering, terrorist financing, and proliferation, and those main 3 offenses. But when we are talking about TF, we have to be so specific, okay? You can either, as a country, when you are conducting your national risk assessment, of course, take on board the TF risk for NPOs. But my experience has shown that sometimes it's good to do it as an independent assessment. That is for the NPO, and we focus on requirements as they are embedded in Reg 8. That way, you'll be so specific that you do not mix issues of money laundering when you're undertaking a TF risk assessment for the NPOs. That's the advice that I can give. But immediately you begin to mix, even the measures that you are going to be coming up, you definitely confuse the sector. You need to be so focused. What measures are we talking about? Are they measures for the money laundering, for the country? Are they measures specifically for the NPOs dealing with TF? And I've always personally advise those that are going for this mutual evaluation that be focused on the TF, so that even the measures that you are coming up with are not just talking about MLTF. Of course, that can be considered under Reg 1. But when we are talking about NPOs, please focus on TF. And I appreciate that question. It's very, very important that we know what we are recommending, and we can't just be so general when we are recommending these measures that we're trying to come up with.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that feedback. So I see another question here, but I'm going to move on. It says, I believe maybe when Yona or Julie or Ida comes in to close the conversation, they can touch on that. It says, how do we distinguish money for laundering and genuine money? So it means CAH has a lot of trainings, to do. And I believe you are going to live up to that expectation. So, Dr. Stephen and DFAT, I think this has been quite educative. It's really, been expository to a very large extent, understanding what TF risk assessment looks like. And thank you for sharing insight from your respective jurisdictions in Uganda and Zambia. I think based on some of the feedback that you have shared with us, is the fact that not all NPOs have similar level of exposure to vulnerability or threats. And it's really interesting to listen to DFAT when he talked about an assessment they carried out for over 4,000 NPOs, and only 4 were actually at risk, and about 20 something were medium risk. So it's really important that we take, a risk-based we adopt a risk-based approach to TF assessment. And I think both of you alluded to the importance of data generation. It's really interesting, and it's really good to note that the kind of data you take into the analysis will, have the tendency to make or mar the end product. And we want to be sure that NPOs are not categorized as what they are not, because the process has been faulty in any way, in one way or the other. I also take recognition of the recommendations on mitigations. I take it. So, I noted it so significantly, which both of you shared, that it is about mitigating the level of risk and the vulnerability, even to those that have been identified to be at risk. I think this is really important. And also creating opportunity for a co-ownership of the process, a multi-sectoral approach to this risk-based approach is very important. And both of you alluded to that. And I think one important point that you also raised, which I found to be interesting, is actually using the outcome of this assessment as a learning tool, advocacy tool, and educative, tool for every other persons involved, all the stakeholders, through the use of media. I think this is really interesting. And I think the final point from me before I invite, both of you to give your final remarks, I'll check the room if there are other questions, is the fact that the current state of our sector makes it even more challenging, not only to regulators, but to us as NPOs in terms of our vulnerability. Already we are facing stiff and unhealthy competitions between and among ourselves. And the more the funds shrink, the more desperate NGOs actually becomes. And that would, like you rightly said, is a grave concern. And I think your colleagues in West Africa also share similar sentiment on what the restrictions and the shrinking funding and resources to NPOs, what it means to them as regulators. We hope collectively some of the conversations that we are having in West Africa is how to redefine the different national laws for NGOs. So NGO Act, NPO laws, to be more robust and create opportunity for NPOs to be able to mobilize resources locally. So NPOs that are thinking of, getting into social enterprise, they have, a set of legislative recognitions or regulatory support to do so. And those who will like to, or who are trying to, render certain services and charge for them, are also able to do so without contradicting their NPO status. So these are some of the conversation taking place, in West Africa, for the laws that we have, not only to regulate, but also to create the space for the sector to thrive and mobilize its own resources within an applicable, law in a certain or a given jurisdiction. I believe at some point the CAH would give us platform, will present a platform where there can be cross-sharing of knowledge, ideas, not only between the NPOs across the continent, but also civil society, especially as we are all having similar experience with the current changes within our space. So I'm going to start with DFAT, since I can still see you in the room. I hope the internet's be kind to us this time. if you can just give us your final word in 2 minutes, maybe a point that you haven't made on how the processes, the TF risk-based in Zambia, an area or some of the new things you are trying to do, and maybe recommendations for those that are now considering to start the process. Pifat, you have 2 minutes.
All right, so thank you very much, Amara, and I just wanted to mention that thank you very much for the opportunity that was given and the knowledge that has been shared and the things that we have discussed here. I'd like to thank the Civic Advisory Hub initiative and just to commend them that we can do even more of such engagement. I know most of the countries are going out through the third round mutual evaluation, fifth mutual evaluation. My advice that let us make sure that we put our houses in order, especially when it comes as we prepare for the mutual evaluation, as there will be more focus on effectiveness than that rather than on technical compliance. I think it is very, very important for those that are conducting the risk assessment for NPOs. My advice that as soon as you finish your report, please think of coming up with a strategy and the implementation plan. It is very, very important because some of the requirements under Reg 8 and IO 10, you need to demonstrate that actually you are properly monitoring those NPOs that may be at risk of abuse for TF. So it is very important, other than just coming up with a report, that you also develop a strategy as well as an implementation plan and regularly review changes that are taking place in the space of the threats as well as the vulnerability. So thank you very much and hope to see you next time. Thank you from my end.
Moderator, do I proceed?
You are muted.
Oh, sorry. Thank you so much. My apologies. Thanks, DFAT. We managed to hear your final remarks. I know the internet hasn't been so kind. So, Dr. Stephen, whilst you wrap up in 2 minutes, there is a final question that I would like you to attempt. It says, should significant foreign funding flow be a criteria for high risk classification, especially considering that most NPO in Africa rely on foreign funding? I think I picked that already, but I think it came up again. You already answered that. And I remember your feedback when you said, in fact, now you have a bit more concerns for NPO sector due to the restriction and shrinking funding, because the limited resources means that people becomes more what's the word now, desperate, to access the resources and probably pay little attention to the source of the resources they are trying to get. So I think you already answered that. And I think also the last question, which I was expecting maybe Hilda or Julie, when they close the meeting, is to differentiate between clean money and illicit money laundering. So money laundering, I mean, yeah, like I said, I'm tempted to answer. Money laundering is you have bad money and you don't want people to see it. I mean, you want to clean it. So you've received money or you've gotten money from some illicit act, drug dealings, whatever, and you want the money to appear clean. So you have to launder it for it to be washed to be clean. Whilst normal money, the kind of money that Yuna has, and the one that I have is not much, but it's very clean. So, Dr. Stephen, we would like to hear your parting words for 2 minutes.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, moderator. Unfortunately, we have had very limited time because I'm
Yes.
sure DFAT, even I will still have so much information to put forward, but we have been restricted by time. I think on my side, when it comes to the Ugandan NPOs, I think we have two very big opportunities that are going to run concurrently. One is this risk assessment, the second round. Now, I think having learned and picked experiences from the first one, I just hope this one is going to be better done, and even all the new areas to focus on are going to be looked into. But of course, the other opportunity that is there is that we are reviewing our regulatory framework. So it means that like the kind of areas you said we need to look at, the mechanism and the strategies on how to address this whole shrinking funding arrangement is key. But of course, something I wanted to say about that before I actually go off is that because of the mistrust between the government and the sector, even if government tried to put in place those mechanisms, the sector still does not trust the government, whether those mechanisms have been put there to control them or something like that. Because I can tell in 2015, when we were reviewing our laws, the government even wanted to open a fund for the sector. The sector said, no, we don't trust that fund. So, and yet over the years, you realize that they needed such a fund. So I think going forward, both the risk assessment and the review of the laws that are going to take place, I think the sector needs to trust the government. Because if we continue not trusting each other, we shall wake up one day and regret why we did not trust each other with whatever is going on. So overall, for me, I just want to thank the organizers of this, but also moderator. Thanks for the great work. I just hope we would have another session to even bring out all the information. I can actually tell you that 3/4 of whatever we should have said here was left out. I just hope another opportunity can be there. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stephen, and thank you, Mr. Difat, for your time and for sharing your expert insight with us, your years of experience within the AML CFT and as a regulator. Thank you for sharing it with us. Like you rightly said, we didn't have enough time to delve deeper into some of those issues and for our colleagues to actually ask you personal questions, because I know I believe it's the same in East Africa. We face different level of challenges and frustrations each time we deal with regulators. So I'm sure somebody want to ask you, I am yet to receive my certificate. Where is it? Even on this platform, but they have been restricted to do so. So we're going to keep the space open and continue the conversation. But thank you for sharing with us our processes of TF risk-based assessment, how it goes in your respective countries, and some of the things that colleagues now thinking of going into that process should take consideration of, especially making it, risk-based approach in mitigation, in data collection, in analysis, in sharing, dissemination, etc., etc. And one thing that both of you said that stood out for me is that not all NPOs are the same level of vulnerability. And your work is not to disrupt the good work that we do, but to make it better. Thank you so much. At this point, I thank both of you and the colleagues who have joined the call. I'm inviting Julie to close this meeting right now. Thank you. Julie or Hilda?
Hilda will be closing the meeting.
Yeah, Hilda, please.
You're welcome.
Very much. Thank you very much. It was a very fruitful engagement, despite the time being short and the internet interruptions that we got to face. But well, this is Africa. We have electricity issues and we get to understand. Our problems are kind of interconnected. I want to take this opportunity to thank you very much for taking part in this engagement. I would like to take an opportunity to thank our moderator, Ms. Omalara. Thank you very much. You did very well, interjecting in, summarizing the key points that have been highlighted and brought forward, and as well as sharing a bit of the civil society perspective and giving us depth of West Africa perspective. this platform, this is what it is made for. That is what TLT Africa is made for, is leaders talk. And you mentioned something that if we could bring again CSOs so that we cross-share knowledge from the different parts of Africa. Yes, it's something that we can look into, and it's something that we can put on this TLT. We can bring different CSO leaders, and just like the name states it, the leaders talk. And I would also request for the people on the call and experts on the call, if there are any topics that they would feel could be of interest on this sector, to reach out to us and suggest, for the experts suggest, and then we can schedule. For the participants, if there's something that they still want to get more knowledge about, reach out and we can identify experts to come and share knowledge, and we talk using this platform. I would like to thank our panelists. Dr. Stephen, thank you very much. We appreciate the great work you're doing in the sector. We are very appreciative that Civic Advisory Hub gets to be on the technical committee that is going to conduct the risks assessment. And I hope that will represent the sector really, really well, plus other NGOs, private sector, and the government that is part of the working group. And it's good to know that we appreciate that there could be no new vulnerabilities with the shrinking space. It's something that you highlighted. It's good to know. It's good to take note of that. But I believe the risk assessment will then best inform us. Right now, it's good to know it's there, but let's get done with the risk assessment and we get to know, will it inform us, and how can we address that with the sector. Difat, thank you very much for joining us from Zambia. I appreciate the questions that you asked. I believe that other FIUs, NPOs, not only Uganda, is going to do the NPO risk assessment. So the questions that you put forward that we should ask ourselves, if we are getting into this exercise again, we should ask ourselves, how relevant was the previous one? Was the methodology right? Such questions. And I believe the technical working group, of which we have so many of them attending this call, from Uganda, but also other countries, it's something that they will take home. It's a take home and something that they'll work on. Thank you very much for that. Send our greetings to our brothers in Zambia and Lusaka. At the end of it all, we are all for focused, proportionate, and targeted supervision. We are looking at a risk-based approach. It's what we all desire to have in all countries, so that the work of the legitimate NPOs is not being disrupted. Because when it's disrupted, there's so many unintended consequences that go right down to the beneficiaries. It's not only the NGOs and the staff, but the ripple effect is really very great. So at the end of it all, this is what we are looking forward, and we hope that we can attain that on our continent. And last of all, I would like to thank our team. Julie, thank you very much for the opening remarks. You mentioned the regional conference that we're holding in Gaborone. So our registration, the numbers have gotten quite up and we've closed the registration, but some of our sessions will be a hybrid session and we'll share the links. So for those of us who cannot make it to Gaborone, you'll log on to that and you'll be able to participate or listen in. But also for those who feel they don't want to miss out on the conversation and you can fund yourself, your air ticket and accommodation, please reach out to us and we'll see if we can make arrangements and create some room. Thank you very much to the CAR team. Thank you, Yona. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Julie, once again. Thank you, Shami, for all the great work that you do to make sure this comes forward. And thank you all the participants. We love you from Uganda. Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Stephen. Thank you, my friend. Yeah, bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Arnold.
Yes, please.
Why are we still? Omwerabidde gundi yakwerabidde wama thank you mbadde manyi oli mu kibiina already
Leero
werabidde
saasoma.
Arnold era toli ku ssomero